Welcome to the second edition of the Cooker's Corner. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody who watched the first edition with my good friend Raw Dog Robbie Idol. You know Raw Dog.
I know Raw Dog.
We're from the Twisted Wrestling Studios here in beautiful Inglewood, Florida, and we'd like to thank the sponsor of this week's show, Mr. President. Be careful who you vote for. Boy, ain't that the truth.
Yep.
Well, my guest this week is a friend. I've known him for a long time. We never were in the same circles. We didn't travel together, but I've known him, and I've known of him. He's a pro wrestler, an actor, and an author. A regular Renaissance man. He's also a handyman if you got it. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, Mike Mcclaskey. Would it be better if your name was Mike Mcclaskey? You might be related to Gator McCluskey, but you probably didn't know who that is, do you?
I've gone Mcclaskey, all different kinds of things.
I was told to make sure it's Mcclaskey.
Yes, pronounce it properly. So, again, thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me into the Twisted Wrestling studio. Thank you very much,
Wrestlers
sir.
shake hands.
Yes. Yes.
Just don't shake my hand, because I don't like that handshake.
And they wipe their feet. So we did that. We did that before we got in. The name, so when I started wrestling in 1978, 1979, Mike Mcclaskey is a little hard to, again, pronounce. It always came out Mcclaskey. So I went with a guy that I used to work with, Dan Bench. Loved it. Nice and short and strong. Dan Bench. And the funny thing was, I'd have people say to me, well, how do you spell that? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, like,
Bench? You don't, Johnny Bench? Park Bench?
Right.
You don't know how to spell Dan Bench?
Weight bench?
And then, of course, I came from Barbells, Georgia. And people say, oh, yeah, I love Barbells, Georgia. Well, that's great because it doesn't exist.
I hate Barbells, to be honest with you.
Well, it's in Nautilus County. You know, Barbells, Georgia and Nautilus County.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I've been drove through there plenty of times.
If you want to sponsor the show, Nautilus, give us a call.
Nautilus, yeah. Again, doesn't exist.
Oh.
But I went with Dan Bench when I did some TV for Mike and Steve, which you also did. I did use Mike Mcclaskey because I figured that was a local thing, and I did want people to know me.
I remember you wore green trunks on one of the shows.
Wore green trunks on a lot of those shows. Yep. That was a good time. I really enjoyed that.
Working for Mike and Steve was always fun. I mean, they were awesome, and God bless Mike. Rest in peace, buddy.
Yep. So how I got involved with that, and I'll throw it back over to you in a minute and ask you how you got involved with that. I was going down to Puerto Rico for Luis Estella to do TV taping down there, which...
Not to interrupt you, but the first time I was ever on TV was against Luis Estella.
There you go.
1982.
Yeah. Which that whole Puerto Rico trip was another story, which I'll get to in a minute. But so I had to fly from Tampa to Miami and got on the plane. And here's Danny Spivey, here's Luis Estella, here's a few other wrestlers that I knew getting on. And I had an empty seat next to me. And Mike Graham gets on the plane. And I kept my mouth shut. Mike's looking around, and he's looking at his ticket, and he's looking at his seat, and he sits down next to me. Again, I kept my mouth shut because I wanted to wait until we were in the air before I said anything to Mike.
Before he threw you out off the plane.
Before he threw me out,
wait till you, I don't know, you want to get thrown off the plane in the air, or I don't know.
Well, I didn't want him asking for another seat.
I know.
So as soon as we got up in the air, I introduced myself and I thanked him for what him and his family has meant to professional wrestling. And that was basically it. And then he asked what I was doing. I said I was going down to Puerto Rico to wrestle for Luis. And we started talking about wrestling. And he mentioned that they started Florida Championship Wrestling again, Championship Wrestling from Florida again, which I knew that. And he said, why don't I come by sometime? Stop by the studio. It's at the old studios. And I said that I would love to. The thing of that story is that I didn't force myself on him. I didn't want to overextend my welcome sitting next to him. Went down and wrestled, came back, and maybe a week or two later, I went by the Armory in Tampa and saw Mike, and I actually ended up, this was before Dusty got back involved with him, I actually ended up co-producing a show with them in Clearwater at, oh man, now I'm drawing a blank. But up in Clearwater, we ran a show and had a good time, and it went well. And then Dusty got involved, and they no longer were doing small shows.
Yeah,
Dusty
they
took them to
switched it
big shows.
PWF wrestling.
Yeah, yep. And but I did TV with them as you did. So let me ask you, how did you get the call to get involved with Mike and Steve?
Well, I knew him from Championship Wrestling from Florida, and I actually remember we were doing a show at a roller skating rink in Tampa, and Steve was on the show. And he's like, Bob, because we and Jerry Gray were the Mighty Yankees for Championship Wrestling for Florida. And we beat Mike Graham and Steve Kerr for the titles, NWA Florida Tag Team Champions. But anyways, and Steve was on the show at the skating rink. He said, me, Gordon, and Mike are starting Florida Wrestling back up. Do you want to be part of it? Of course, I said no, and that's kidding. No, of course I would love to, Steve and Mike were always awesome to me, and two of the best to ever step in the ring. You ever work with them?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're two of the best ever, and great people too. Just fun. Easy as could be. You learn something but were you a wrestling fan growing up, and who trained you? That's what I like to know.
Wrestling fan growing up,
By the way, not sponsored by Mountain Dew yet, but I gotta have one.
I'm gonna assume that you, like me, watched Championship Wrestling from Florida. I'm gonna say Sundays. I used to throw the couch cushions down on the ground and mimic the moves.
Yep.
Jack and Jerry Briscoe.
Well, for the record, we didn't use the cushions in my area.
Oh, excuse me. Well, you probably didn't have cushions on your couch where you live, where you grew up.
No, well,
we actually
kayfabe.
We could afford cushions on our couch, so we were, in a little higher neighborhood. But yeah, so I went to college in Lakeland to play baseball. I played for a year and a half, and the coach and I didn't quite see eye to eye, so I got cut.
Are you saying you were a troublemaker?
I was. I had my own little way of doing things, and the coach didn't agree with it, so we parted ways. Looking for something to do at the end of my sophomore year of college, and somebody had found a flyer in a newspaper about trying to be a professional wrestler, and we're gonna leave the trainer out of it because he was not well liked in these parts.
Oh, that's not fair. Is his name Ron Hill?
His name might be Ron Hill.
Oh,
yeah, might be Ron Hill, the Golden Gladiator. Yeah.
Oh, look at this guy! He's doing it again. Last week he's making noises. I'm sorry, Mike.
Interrupting the show. I think we got to start all over again.
But he's not doing a good job.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So here's what I wasn't told. Again, coming from baseball, you have single A, double A, triple A, and then you go to the bigs. So I thought what I was being trained in was comparable to single A. Yeah. We were wrestling at bars. We were wrestling in auditoriums. We were wrestling in parking lots in front of 100 people.
Yeah.
I
know what that was like.
I associated that to single A wrestling. And at some point in time in my training and in my wrestling, I went to one of the guys that had been there for a while, and I said, so when do we move up? When do we move up to double A, to triple A? When do I get to go to Tampa?
Right.
And he said, that doesn't happen. I said, what do you mean that doesn't happen?
Pro wrestling. This isn't real sports.
Well, he said, we're scabs. I liken it to union, non-union. The guys in Tampa, NWA, that was basically a union. Yeah. I was non-union. We were competition for them. It wasn't going to happen. We'll get to talk about Bob Roop in a little bit.
Outlaw wrestling.
Outlaw wrestling is what we were. Which really, really disappointed me because I had my heart, my goal set on NWA in Tampa. I got to a point where I was about 280 pounds, and I was good looking and 22, 23 years old in the ring. I did get a chance to wrestle on a show.
I was 22 and 23, and I wasn't good looking.
Yeah, well, that's why you wore the mask.
Well, that's
yeah. But I did wrestle on an independent show with Bob Roop and Ronnie Garvin, and got to talk to them a little bit. And then, so I wrestled Larry Malenko. I wrestled the great Malenko in one of our independent shows.
One of the greatest human beings I've ever known.
Yep. I didn't know at the time that he was training people. Yeah. I found out later that he was training, and I did get involved with him and his boys in training. But we're backstage one night, and the promoter comes up to me and says, oh, by the way, everybody, this is the great Malenko, and you're going to be working with him tonight. Looking back, I wish I would have known that a week earlier so that I could have mentally prepared myself. We went out and we had what I would call a decent match, but nothing that what I wanted.
Yeah.
Because if it would have been a better match, I think he would have pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I'm starting a school in Tampa.
Right.
Why don't you come with me?" Again, I eventually.
Well, maybe he thought you were a lost cause right at the start. I'm just
one of the outlaws.
a joke,
yeah.
people.
Yeah. But I did do that, and I worked for Larry. In fact, I showed you the card
right.
there, which you won't be able to see, but there's Joe and Dean, and me right in the middle.
I think Dale Apollo's dead. Raul's gone.
Raul's gone.
Black Magic. You know who that was, folks? Norman Smiley, awesome guy.
Norman Smiley. But
Big D. Vern Henderson.
So one of my cute Larry shows was Larry put on a show. I want to say it was Newport Richie, and he booked me for $60, which was a great payday.
For those days, especially.
Went and worked. His boys were on the card. Some of the other local guys were on the show, and there wasn't anybody there. There were 50 people there, typical independent crowd. And Larry came up to me after the show with 320s, and I reached in and I pulled one out. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, I don't need that, Larry. I have a day job. I'm doing fine, just like the song goes.
Yeah.
I said, "This will put gas in my car, and it'll get me a pizza on the way home." I said, "You need that more than I do. And Larry, I appreciate you. You paved the way for guys like me to come in and do this, so I appreciate you." I said, "Anytime you ever need me, please call me." And he did call me. I worked a lot of shows for Larry.
Well, he probably appreciated your honesty and your...
Well, and when he would call me and say, I got a show. In fact, you were probably late 80s. You were probably in that circle by then.
Yeah.
Anytime he called me and booked me, I'd say, "I'd be more than happy to do it for you, Larry, but you're not paying me." And then that was when his health started to really deteriorate.
I did something similar once. We were doing WCW TV. We stopped in Tampa to see him because he had a show at a strip club. I think it was called a Dollhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Bob, there's some people here from Japan, and I want you to wrestle." I didn't go to wrestle. We just stopped by to see him on our way to WCW. And I wrestled because he asked me to, because there was representatives from Japan.
Yeah.
And then he went to pay me after the show, and I said, "You don't got to pay me."
No.
And I had so much respect for him. I do have so much for anybody who knows me knows that I love the great Malenko.
Yeah.
He was like a father figure to me.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but hey,
No.
I'm just as nice a guy as him. I didn't take the money either.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was real sad.
Nice or we're stupid. I don't know which.
I think there was a show that I was booked on, and he was too ill to do it, and that really hurt. I mean, that hurt the whole business when he passed.
It was one of the worst feelings of my life when I got the call. I remember just dropping to the floor and putting the phone down and just crying my eyes out. Like I said, I don't even want to talk about that, or I'll start crying right now. And we don't want to see an overbearing, obnoxious, big fat slob crying on a Sunday.
No, we don't. Not on a Monday either.
Tuesday's okay, but not Monday and Sunday.
So getting back to Championship Wrestling from Florida, which I do remember you and I sharing locker rooms there. Steve
must have
and
been
Mike.
so important to me. I have no memory of that, but I'm just kidding.
But one of my best stories, and so if someone were to say, "How do you know when you've made it as a wrestler?" Other than getting signed to a contract, well, when other wrestlers acknowledge you would be one of the ways.
That's what I always say.
So I'm there one night, and I'm supposed to wrestle Fred Ottman.
Oh, I love
he was working as
trained by the great Malenko too.
Yeah,
he was initiated.
He was wrestling as a Big Steel Man, and Dusty was running the show. So I'm putting my boots on, and Dusty comes over to me with Fred, and Dusty brings Fred over to me, which off the bat you don't happen. Usually
right.
Dusty takes me over to Fred.
Right.
So Dusty brings Fred over to me and said, "Fred, this is Mike, Fred. You guys are working together tonight. 3 minutes. This is what I want. Bada, bada, bada. You're going to finish it with this." And then he puts his hand on my shoulder and he turns to Fred and he says, "Do what this guy tells you to do. He knows what he's doing." And Dusty walked away. And I could have died.
Yeah,
right there on that spot, I could have died because I was happy. But to me, that was validation. Again, when someone of Dusty's nature says to another wrestler, "This guy knows what he's doing," that's the validation that you're there.
Right, and I had those two that makes you feel like $1 million, right? Like,
yes,
I was at Greensboro Coliseum back in '89, and I was wrestling Arn Anderson. He'd just come back from the WWE as the Brain Busters, right?
Yeah.
And I always used to find a private area of the dressing room, kind of a corner, and I was sitting on the other side of a locker, and I heard Flair come up to Arn, and he said, "Who you got tonight?" And he said, "I got Bob Cook," and he goes, "Oh, he's a real good hand." And I'm sitting behind the locker. They didn't know it. I was just like, man, Ric Flair,
There you
makes
go.
you feel like $1 million. We're talking about the NWA World Heavyweight Champion when it meant something.
Yeah.
Not like today.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the things that got me into locker rooms was reliability. Always showing up in shape, always showing up sober.
Yeah, that helps.
And
after the show, that's another story.
That's another story. But when Steve Kern, when we were doing TV there in Tampa, they would do 2 shows. They would tape 2 shows, and I wrestled in the first show. And usually they didn't like to use the guys for the 2 shows. They wanted to use you for one or the other. But somebody didn't show up, and Steve came to me, and I stayed dressed out.
Yeah.
Steve came up to me during the second show, and he says, "I hate to ask you this, but will you work again?" I said, "Steve, you hired me. You hired me for the night. So yes, I'll work again." I said, if you need me to go out there for every show and every match, I'll be more than happy to. He says, you're going to lose again. He says, you got to put this guy over again. I said, again, Steve, you hired me.
If you're in the wrestling business and you have a problem losing, get out of the wrestling
Get out of it.
I mean, that's ridiculous. That's the thing with me. I never brought my drama from home on the road. I didn't cause drama at the show. I showed up on time, did what I was told. Didn't care if I won or lose. I was just happy to be there.
Yeah.
We made big money, people. When I worked at the Sportatorium in Tampa, we got $25. If you work twice, extra 15.
Yeah. So I said to Steve, I told that to Steve. I said, Steve, if you have someone here that is refusing to do this for you, they need to leave.
Right.
So I went out and wrestled again for him. Can we talk about Jumbo Beretta?
I love Jumbo.
I love Jumbo too. So Jumbo Beretta was at Championship Wrestling from Florida, and he was supposed to go against Danny Spivey. And he was supposed to go under. He was supposed to lose to Danny Spivey. So you know what Jumbo Beretta did? Put all his stuff back into his bag and said, I'm not losing on this local. This is my backyard. I'm not losing. So he left. You know what Steve and Mike did? They came up to Danny Spivey and said, go out in the ring and stand in the middle of the ring. We're going to count to 10 and raise your hand.
Yeah.
And Gordon Soley sat there and said, I guess Jumbo Beretta was too chicken to face Danny Spivey.
Now, that to Jumbo's credit, and I'd like to get him on the show, Jumbo, if you're listening. Let's discuss this situation. But he was starting to do Japan at that time. You know how sometimes that conflicts with your mind, like I'm going to do Japan, and I don't want to lose in America. You know what I mean? How that can get back to the Japan. You know how?
No, I don't.
Oh, well, I don't either, so I'm not sticking up for Jumbo. You should have taken the fall. We're talking about Dan Spivey. He could have kicked you up for real anyways. Oh.
No, I don't. Because, again, when they called you and said, we need you to come in and do a job, you say, yes, sir.
Oh, I understand.
When do you need me there? Yeah. And, again, we don't know the parameters. Yeah. We don't know. Maybe they were grooming Jumbo to do something. I know a young kid named Johnny Pavros who's on this card here. Angelo Poffo, we'll talk about Angelo.
He was also on the card, right?
Angelo was also on the card. Angelo Poffo booked me, and it was going to be Lanny and Angelo. This was at a restaurant up in Indian Rocks near where Angelo and all of them lived. And it was going to be Angelo and Lanny against somebody and Johnny Pavros in a tag match in the final. I had already wrestled. Johnny Pavros says, I'm not losing. He says, I can't lose. He says, I'm hoping to get on with Championship Wrestling from Florida, so I don't want to lose. Really? Really? What is your mindset? So he packed up and left. Angelo came over to me. I said, you don't have to say a word, Ange. I'm already still dressed out. So I went out and did the tag match with them. But really? That's your mindset?
I could tell you a funny story about not wanting to win.
Go ahead.
When I was in WCW, Dusty Rhodes was the booker. And they were starting this thing called the Battle of the Underdogs. You know, it was the guys that they thought of as the TV guys wrestling each other. And we had a meeting at center stage. Everybody's sitting around a ring. Dusty's in there and he's talking. He's going, we're going to shake things up tonight. He said, even Bobby Cook's going to get a win. And I stood up and I said, but Dusty, I don't want to win. He said, sit down and shut up, Bobby. You're going to win. And so I went out there and I beat Joey Maggs and then I ended up hurting him accidentally. But anyways, I didn't want to win.
Yeah.
You know, and then 30 years later, I saw Terry Taylor at the NXT show in Venice. And I walked up to Terry. I ain't seen him in years. And I said, Terry, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Bob Cook. Shook his hand. He goes, of course I remember you. You're the only guy I ever knew that didn't want to win on TV.
Yeah.
Like, you remember that? Because he was there, you know. So I'm an idiot, but I enjoyed the win.
I had actually told Mike Graham in our conversations that because he said, we're not going to put you over. I said, if you wanted to put me over, I wouldn't know how to go over. I said, no, that's not my nature. My nature is to go in and do what it is you asked me to do. Yeah. Mike calls me one day and he says, if you're ever in the Tampa area, come by. I want to introduce you to Dusty. And at the Sportatorium.
Right.
And I drop by and he takes me upstairs and there's Dusty sitting behind the desk and we talk for half an hour. Just the greatest experience.
Dusty was awesome, yeah.
Yeah. You know, if you take everything away, all the matches away, all the accolades away, still to be able to meet Dusty Rhodes, to be able to spend time with Angelo Poffo. So let's talk about Angelo Poffo.
The miser.
The miser.
Yeah.
We were doing the Pinellas County Fair. They had it booked for the week, which was a great gig.
I might have been there. I might have wrestled Lanny on that show. I remember wrestling Lanny on a fair show.
And it was actually decent money because it was a bought show. So we had a trailer set up behind the ring, and I'm in there getting dressed, and Angelo Poffo comes walking in. Nobody says a word to Angelo Poffo. You know why? They didn't know who he was.
Yeah, yeah.
So I did. I knew who he was. I go right up to him, Mr. Poffo, how are you? And I also know that you're the father of Randy Macho Man Savage and Lanny Poffo. And we talked and talked and talked, and I gave him my number and asked him for his, and he gave me his, and went out and I wrestled Vern Henderson.
Yeah.
Huge story about that. We wrestled the Big V, a lot stiff. Don't say a little.
Okay.
I got no problem saying a lot stiff.
Big V's another Malenko guy. Was it a Green Bay Packer or NFL?
Green Bay Packer, right. Yeah. I think he. So we had a show earlier in the run, and it was an incredible show. Everything, bing, 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 everything imaginable, every spot worked. And then we came back later in the run, and I said to Vern, why don't we just do the same show? Nothing worked. Nothing hit, nothing landed, which that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
You know, that's the way it goes. But out of that, I developed a 1.5-year friendship with Angelo Poffo. We traveled together. We spent time together. The owner of the Twisted Wrestling Alliance, Joe Saraceno, I took him over, and we met with Judy Poffo and Lanny, and got some memorabilia from them. But just a great time, and what an interesting guy.
Yeah, he was awesome. Our
friendship eventually dissolved because of his miser, because of his inability to want to spend money.
Yeah.
I just couldn't get over that, and it drove a wedge between us.
That's too bad, because he was a great guy. He gave me great advice once. He said, Bob, the wrestling business is the only business that is a true work. Because even in roller derby, you have to at least know how to skate.
Yeah.
Get it? Some people don't even know how to wrestle, but they're in the business making money.
Speaking of advice, so he knew that I was going to go down to Puerto Rico, and he said a couple of things. He said, don't piss anybody off, and don't drink anything they give you after the show.
Oh,
he says they have a habit, and this is rumor only, of
allegedly
slipping something into the drinks, especially of Americans, and then just kind of messing with them. Nothing harmful. So I go down to Puerto Rico, and I'm going to do 5 TV tapings in one night. I put my knee out the second match against Hercules Ayala. I remember what Angelo said, don't piss anybody off.
Right.
I've still got 3 more tapings to do. So I take my trunks down, and I'm wrapping my knee, and the promoter comes in. He says, are you all right? I said, you bet I'm all right. I said, the only question I have for you is, do you want me to sell it? He said, no, because we don't know when these tapings are going to air.
Right.
I said, not going to sell the knee. Went out, did 3 more tapings, come back into the locker room. The promoter comes in with an open can of beer and goes to hand it to me.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the second thing Angelo says to me, don't piss anybody off and don't drink anything they give you. I said, you know what? I'm taking some medication for a thing I got going on, and I can't have alcohol. But thank you, though. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
6 months,
thinking.
6 months later, Bruiser Brody goes down to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, we know.
And we know what happened the rest of the story.
But what's the moral of this story? Back in these days, Mike was a man. He blew his knee out, and he went and worked again. Like Robbie Idol, when he tore his bicep, a week later he's wrestling Sting. Didn't have a couple of cuts in his head and wouldn't come here and train.
Yeah, because I made a commitment. My commitment was 5 matches. And again, remembering what Angelo Poffo said, don't piss him off. Like, okay.
That was quick thinking, though.
Yeah. I went down with Tommy Earl Wright.
Oh yeah, Tommy Wright.
Yeah, and he knew the guy that was married to Wendy Richter at the time.
Hugo
Savinovich.
You're right.
Yeah, and they went out
How
afterwards.
he ever got Wendy, I don't know.
I know.
He was a big fat slob, and she was gorgeous at the time.
Yep.
Must have been the money.
Yep. But Tommy and Hugo went out afterwards, and we had like an 8:00 flight the next morning. And as I'm getting ready to leave my motel room, Tommy's coming back, and I'm like, dude, you got to put yourself together and let's go. Nothing against Tommy Wright.
Funny
Earl, if you're
Tommy,
out there.
It's a funny story you're talking about Tommy Wright. Like you met Angelo the first time, and you knew who he was, and the other idiots didn't. Which I've never understood the mentality being in the wrestling business and not knowing your history. But we were doing another show at a roller skating rink, and I was wrestling Tommy. That's the only reason that came up. But a guy came in the dressing room, and the wrestlers yelled, "Hey, no marks in the dressing room." You know who it was? It was Al Costello from the Fabulous Kangaroos. So I said, wait a minute, sir. I said, hey, don't you guys know who this is? This is Al freaking Costello from the Fabulous Kangaroos. Show some respect. So, had to like chastise these idiots for not knowing their wrestling history. And then I had a great conversation with him, like you did with Angelo. I wish I would have had a camera because he's a legend in wrestling. Yeah. But not to know your history, get out of the business, you losers.
And I'll take that one step further. The Legends Luncheon, which Bob's is one of the hosts of.
I'm on the board of directors.
Tony Garcia. Tony Garea.
Yeah.
Tony Garea is in there. And everybody's nudging me saying, who's that?
Right.
Who is that? Because they had seen me go up and shake his hand because I wanted to welcome him.
Right.
And so I'm telling him, and I'm actually Googling to show him that WWF Tag Team Champion.
Yeah, Tag Team Champion was an agent for years.
Yeah.
By the way, Tony Garea is the one who came up to me after I worked in WWE, and he said, Bob, we like the way you work, but you got a different pair of boots. He was talking about my Terry Funk boots, telling me I couldn't wear my WWTV, but at the same time they had the Godwins who were wearing work boots. I couldn't wear my Terry Funk boots. Tony Garea! I mentioned that to him at the Legends once, and he just laughed.
He just laughed. Yeah. And he probably said, can somebody get this guy away from me?
I think the reason that he didn't want me wearing it is because Terry Funk beat his ass on TNT wearing his boots.
Allegedly.
No, I saw it. He didn't.
Oh, okay.
Allegedly, he did it.
Yeah, it was a real deal.
I don't know about that part.
Yeah, but so again, when I talk to younger wrestlers, and I've gone to some of the training facilities with Frankie Reyes and some of the other ones. Yeah,
the guy that's going to be here on January 11th, Frankie Reyes.
That rat. Yeah.
I'm feeling sick to my stomach.
Yeah. But I tell the young guys, I say, you need to learn the history of this sport.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know who people are. And be able to recognize them, because when you're backstage somewhere, just like you said, and the older guys, us older guys come in, it means something.
To me, it's not even needing to learn. You should want to learn. Like when I was a kid, I wanted to learn. When I was a kid, I bought my first wrestling magazine. Like 1976, had Terry Funk on the cover. He was a world heavyweight champion. I was like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. So I started buying all the back issues because I wanted to know about the history of wrestling.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you want to know about real history of wrestling, get the Gorgeous George book. Well, this is a great book, but get the Gorgeous George book. Awesome book.
I read that. Whatever happened to Gorgeous George?
No, that's a different one.
That
was one from the 70s. This is a newer one. It's a great book. I read it like 3 times, and I don't even read. I don't even know how to read. I'm a wrestler.
Yeah. So the 70s. Speaking of books.
Yeah, we're not talking about it.
We're not talking about this yet.
Oh.
So I wanted to do a little segue. Bob Roop. Again, we're talking to a young guy. If there was an 18-year-old kid in here that wanted to be trained, and you said Bob Roop, he'd say, who?
Yeah.
Okay. Learn your history, guys. Bob Roop, Olympian
He's probably 80 years old now, and if you said, who's Bob Roop, and Bob was here, he could stretch you. That's who Bob Roop is.
Yeah. Bob Roop has a book out. It's a great book. It's called Wrestling with Saddam. If any of you guys are readers, you can get it on Amazon. You can download it on Kindle.
Didn't Saddam wrestle with a rope? Around his neck. Oh! Took it like a man, though. I'd have been crying my eyes out like a sissy if it was me. I'm just saying.
But my relationship with Bob was I was introduced to him at a show, and that I had writing history, and Bob was looking for someone to help him write this book.
Yeah, it's a great story. I've heard it from him.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. For a year, I worked with Bob and
can you get that on Amazon.com?
Yes, you can.
Of course, everything's on Amazon.com. I put my stuff on there for anybody who would buy me.
Yeah, but it's a great book, and any of you wrestling fans, again, you want to know history of the sport, Wrestling for Saddam. It's a great book.
Right.
Speaking of books, I have a book out.
Yes.
Chris Whaley and I wrote a comedy.
For those of you who don't know, Chris Whaley used to be the Masked Saint. He made a movie about his life, starring the one and only, the legendary, late great Roddy Piper. There's some more knowledge. These people are going,
who? Yeah.
Stupid wrestling fans, disgusting.
So,
make me sick.
In writing the book, my background is that I write screenplays as a hobby. We'll get into that. So here's the screenplay for Mr. President.
I want the Bob Cook story, A Life Almost Worth Living. Write that one for me.
So this was started in 1988, thereabouts, and I sent it. I sent a prototype of it to Hulk Hogan through Angelo Poffo, because originally we had written it for Hulk Hogan. Heard nothing.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
Just for a second, and I apologize. Speaking of Hulk Hogan, they did Saturday Night's Main Event last night. They didn't include Hulk Hogan, even in the video clips at the beginning. Shameful, WWE. Shameful. But in the meantime, Hulk Hogan's on UFC last night, carrying the American flag to the ring. Cage, octagon. I'm sorry, go back.
Missed an opportunity. Yeah. So sent the manuscript to Hulk Hogan. 6 months later, he's on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, announcing that he's going to run for president.
Oh.
No correlation.
Right.
Fast forward 20-something years later, Chris gets with me, and we redevelop the script, and we write it for The Rock. Now, at a Legends Luncheon, I hand this very same screenplay to Rocky Johnson.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Rocky. We loved her.
Rest in peace. Who puts it in the garbage can on the way out. Steve Stasiak pulls it out of the garbage can, reads it, and says, "You need to look at this."
Wow.
Gives it to Rocky. Rocky reads it. 6 months later, Rocky calls me and says, "Dwayne's thinking about running for president." Again, no correlation.
Right.
So it's a political comedy about a comedian who runs for president every 4 years, builds popularity.
Is that kind of like Trump? Because he's kind of a joke. Oh, I said it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, we're going to have a
Shot
ball now.
across the bow.
Next
There we
match,
go.
next match. When's the next show? It's going to be after January 11th. Me and Mike right now.
So he picks a popular professional wrestler to be his running mate. He wins. Blah blah blah.
Was his name Jesse Ventura?
And that's where it goes from there.
Yeah.
So we pitched it to The Rock. We pitched it to Hulk. Nothing happened. We pitched it to The Rock. Nothing happened. So we decided to come out in book form, and so there you have it. This can be obtained on Amazon. Imagine that.
What about, can it be obtained at MrPresidentBook.com?
MrPresidentBook.com, our website, which will tell you something about Chris and myself, and then it will take you to Amazon, and that's where you can purchase the book on Amazon.com, or you can always get with us through Twisted Wrestling Alliance, through the Cooker's Corner.
And it's a real book, unlike the one in my head.
It's a real book. And if you stick around to the end of this this segment, I'm going to tell you how I can send you a book. What do you think of that, Bob? Signed an autographed book.
I'm not going to autograph it, that's what you mean.
So what we have is, again, it's a story of a comedian that rises the ranks of comedy, and at some point in time, he picks the professional wrestler who, again, we had written it for The Rock, to be his running mate. Well, lo and behold, the comedian wins. Imagine that, Bob, a comedian, an outsider winning the presidency of the United States.
Well, it's usually the one with the most lies that wins, but we'll go there.
What are the chances that would happen? Not to get too far into it, but a little tragedy happens, and the professional wrestler then becomes president of the United States. He wants to make all these changes.
So you're saying the president did a job for the professional wrestler.
And brought the professional wrestler in. The professional wrestler brings all of his buddies from the wrestling world in to be his cabinet.
Are you sure Hulk Hogan's not the one?
I'm not going to go there. Hulk, if you're listening, there's still a chance for you to make this into a movie,
American Beer and Mr. President.
Yeah, and it just revolves around how the wrestler and the wrestler's ethics are going to try and roll into being president of the United States. So, again, he picks his friends to be his cabinet, and he uses his work ethic of you're not going to get a paycheck unless you work.
Right.
And he brings that into the country.
But this belt here, that's pretty cool too.
So on the cover of the book, we have the championship belt. And so Chris and I both went out and got the belt. And our catchphrase is, buy the book, wear the belt. So if you buy the book, you get to wear the belt and get your picture taken with the belt.
Cool.
And that's a real, somebody, I'm not going to say who, Joe Saraceno, said he'd pay me if I split you open with this belt.
Oh,
and I said, not
wait a
going to
minute.
happen, Joe.
Oh,
not
nice.
going to happen.
We got to go to the gym later. I don't need an excuse. Go ahead and split me open. I could use that as an excuse.
There you go. Yeah.
I'll be like that guy Corey. Make excuses for not showing up to train because I got a split head. Stitches. That's right. I said it. Don't give me that face, Joe. Don't give me that face. I don't care about anybody.
If you don't go to MrPresidentBook.com and if you don't go to Amazon and buy the book, you can always get it through us. You know, I'm going to be like Oprah. Hey, here's a book for you. Hey, here's a book for you. Hey, no, move over. Yeah, here's a book for you. I'm going to be like Oprah and just throwing them out.
I'd rather be like Oprah and say, here's a car for you, here's a car for you, here's a car for me.
Let's start with books.
Okay.
So here's the odd thing about that. And Bob,
I like to call her Orcra.
Okra. Okay.
Orca, like orca, like a whale.
You know, one of the hardest things in wrestling is to get somebody that's established to do something for you. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing here. Chris and I have mailed, I'm going to say 100 books out to celebrities, to dignitary, to politicians. You know what we've heard back?
Nothing.
Zero. Not a word back. Again, we're going to still continue to send it. We're going to still continue to mail it. We go to events and we hand out books, hoping that somebody will read it and say, hey, you know, this is a good idea.
Yeah.
Going back to that, what we said, so I had an idea for a script that featured Sting.
From the police?
No.
Oh.
Featured the wrestler Sting.
Yeah.
Met with Knobs.
Yeah.
Ran into Knobs.
Brian Knobs, for those of you, the Nasty Boys. We're just trying to keep the fans, try to keep up.
The dark-haired Nasty Boy, not the blonde-haired one. I met
Brian
with
Knobs.
him, and we're talking
that's
one day.
Saggs. I don't want to correct you on my show, but that's Jerry Saggs. Knobs is the blonde-haired one.
Oh, Knobs. Okay, so Saggs. I met with Saggs, the dark-haired one, and we had worked together for Mike and Steve, so we had a little bit of a relationship. And I told him about this script idea that I had for Sting because it included other wrestlers.
Yeah.
And he says Jane Fonda wants to film a project.
I met her once.
Okay, how did you meet her?
TBS. With
TBS.
Ted Turner.
There we go.
She was gorgeous when she was young.
So what I did was I asked him, I said, can you do me a favor when you go back to Atlanta and filming, and if you see her, will you tell her about this? Didn't happen. So then I put the word out that I wanted Sting to call me. Sting called me one Saturday. My son comes walking into the room with the phone. He says, Dad, Sting's on the phone. I said the same thing you said. Yeah. I said, the wrestler or the singer?
Every breath you take?
He just kind of looked at me. I go, no, it's the wrestler. Give me the phone. I talked to Steve, and I talked to Steve about the idea for the movie and pitched it, and okay, thank you, and then hung up. I even got with Eric Bischoff about the movie, trying to get backstage, trying to get in. Here's an interesting thing about the movie. It was based on a comedy, a comic. It would have been a live-action version of a comic. I'll tell you, I don't care. Johnny Quest. Sting would have played the blonde in it. Guess who owned Johnny Quest? Was Hanna-Barbera. Hanna-Barbera owned...
I used to watch that when I was a kid.
Johnny Quest. Guess who owned Hanna-Barbera at one point in time?
Turner.
Ted Turner.
Right.
Thank you. So see where all this tied in together, where I had an idea that Ted Turner owned something that Sting could have been involved in, that Jane Fonda wanted to be a part of, and what did I do about it? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Instead of getting in my car and driving to Atlanta and sitting out in front of, what was it, Turner Broadcasting, TBS, and waited for my opportunity, gone in there and knocked the door down, kicked the door in, but instead I'm sitting here with Bob Cook being interviewed.
I kind of feel bad now. Let's talk about a letdown in life.
No, that's all right.
Anyway.
I don't mind. That's the way it goes.
Well, I do. This says, I'm just kidding. No, that's awesome. I'll take the time to read it sometime. I will. I really will. Well, I really won't. No, no, I don't read much.
It's an easy read.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't read much, but I'm going to take the time because the book's right here.
The book's right here. So with that, again, I kicked myself in the rear end for when I was younger, when we were younger, not being more energetic and going out and making our own things happen. So we have a young fella that wrestles in our circuit, Kareem, and Kareem,
the King of Cool.
The King of Cool. Met him a couple of years ago, and I said, "Hey, you're a good-looking young fella. You're into wrestling. You do this jiu-jitsu stuff. Would you be interested in getting into some acting?" He said, "I'd love to." Long story short, I got him in a movie in Tampa. It was released. In the meantime, he's now written his own projects and filmed his own projects. And he's taken what I should have done when I was in my 20s, and he's rolled with it. So, hats off to Kareem.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yep, King of Cool.
He should sponsor the show. I just threw it out there, Speaking of sponsoring the show, if you want to sponsor the show, anybody that wants to sponsor the show, it's the Cooker's Corner. It's only the second episode. I get it, but we're hoping for more. We're hoping for bigger. We're hoping for better.
Yeah.
By the way, Mountain Dew, once again, sponsor the show.
Yeah.
I've drank enough of your juice. It's killing me.
So there we have it.
It was a very interesting story. No, I'm just kidding. It was a good story. You've been, we didn't travel in the same circles. We didn't see each other much in those days. We both did what we loved, right? I loved wrestling. I loved my time in wrestling. The most fond memories I have in life, except for maybe a few others.
Yeah.
And I was never a star either. Not to say you weren't a star. I'm just saying I was never a big star. But I got to meet all the big stars. I got to become friends with all the big stars. You got a lot of legends who'll say you're good, you're this, you're that. And that makes you feel better than what any wrestling fan can think about you in a negative way.
Yeah.
And it means a lot to even be part of the business. To me, why anybody wouldn't want to be part of the business? If you want to be part of the business, come here to the Twisted Wrestling Studios and train with a Cooker. I'm going to show you how to throw a punch. A punch. Something that nobody in wrestling today does very well, except maybe Cody Rhodes and a couple others. But they're old school. And I can teach you how to throw a punch. Well, the only thing I can teach you, but it's something. It's important. It's the little things that matter.
Yeah. Now, you were fortunate enough to actually earn a paycheck from WCW. Mm-hmm. I've seen copies of them.
Oh, did you?
Your pay stubs, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Oh.
I never earned a paycheck from them. So when people would say to me, "But I wrestled for them. I wrestled for WWF. I wrestled for this. I wrestled for that. I wrestled for anybody." And you got paid. You did your job and you got paid. And when people would say to me, "You're a professional wrestler," I say, "I wrestle professionally as a hobby."
Yeah.
Because I don't get a paycheck. I have an 8-to-5 job that I do, which is very important. I tell the young kids today, you have to have a job. You have to be able to afford to get to the next step. When I go to the training sessions, I say there's 3 things that you need to know about professional wrestling. And this goes for any entertainment in general. Number 1, you have to do what the promoter asked you to do. And the promoter, either it's wrestling or it's your boss or it's your wife, that's the promoter. You have to do what the promoter asked you to do.
Except help set up the ring, because that's a scam. Let's be honest.
Obviously, if you have a safety concern, you can step up and say, "You know what, I'm not comfortable with this." But still, for the big picture, do what the promoter wants you to do. If he wants you to go 20 minutes, go 20 minutes. If he wants you to go an hour, go an hour. If he wants you to go 3 minutes, go 3 minutes. That's what you're being hired for. Number 2 is make sure nobody gets hurt. Again, this is wrestling. This is life. Make sure nobody gets hurt. And I always start with saying, start with your partner. If you and I are going to go out there for 20 minutes, my number 1 priority is make sure you don't get hurt.
Right.
It means that I'm going to do whatever I can do in that match to make sure you don't get hurt. In my work, in my 8-to-5, if I'm working with someone, I try and make sure they don't get hurt. That means that safety is of the utmost. And the number 3 is make sure you get paid. When young people would say to me, "What was your record wrestling?" I'd say 224-2. And they'd say, "Well, I've seen you wrestle a bunch of times, and I never saw you win." I go, "Oh, 1 loss I couldn't tell you. The 2 times I consider a loss is I didn't get paid."
Right.
224 times I got paid, 2 times I didn't get paid. Those I consider losses. We both know a promoter. I won't use his name, Dino Puglia.
Oh, I blocked that son of a gun a long time ago.
But you have a promoter that puts on a show, and everybody gets there, and there's a ring, and there's chairs. Baker. And then he says, "Oh, it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to pay you. You can go out and wrestle if you want to." And before he didn't finish that sentence, I'd have my bag pack and I'm out the door
Right.
because I don't play that game. I was on the show with Ox Baker. He booked Ox Baker. Ox Baker wanted $1,000, and I said, "Dude, you don't have $1,000." He said, "Oh no, we're going to do it." I co-promoted that show. I think I paid for the facility, and I said, "I'll pay for the facility, assuming I get my money right off the top." I didn't even go out for the battle royal that Ox Baker was in because I was backstage getting my money back
Right.
for the facility. And then I heard the ruckus. I heard everything break loose because he didn't have enough money to pay everybody else.
But that's sad because I'm talking about a match or a show that Oxford did maybe whatever year Randy Savage died. Dino put on a show in St. Pete or Tampa, wherever it was.
Yeah.
And he flew Ox in. Ox stayed at my house for the weekend because, save on hotels, whatever. And it's Ox Baker, for God's sake. He's awesome. And Dino didn't pay him. And he came all the way from Connecticut. And he was dealing with health. It was later in his life.
Yeah.
And Dino skipped out. I had to actually have a guard take him to his car. I remember the guard's name. Good friend of mine. I'm not going to say his name. But they took him to the car. And I think he took whatever money was there. He didn't pay anybody.
Yep.
He's a piece of garbage, folks.
Yeah.
And he hides behind the Lord.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, when that was one of the drawbacks of the independent circuit was you didn't know who the promoter was going to be.
Yeah.
You'd get a phone call saying we're having a show Friday night at the Civic Center. Will you work? And you don't know who that promoter is going to be. So you always had to be on guard.
But the thing with wrestling is you're talking about winning and losing. Here's the reality, folks. When you win, you don't really win. But when you lose, you don't really lose either. Just enjoy the moment. Enjoy the spotlight. Enjoy the time. You're doing something that very few people ever do and a lot of people dream about.
Yeah.
I used to think of that. Like I'd come home from a show and I'd be sore and hurt, but I'd be happy as heck. And I couldn't wait to get to the next show because for that few minutes, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, for that few minutes, at least in my mind, I'm sure your mind too, you're somebody.
Yeah.
All the people are watching, whether they're excited about it or not, but they're watching, they're paying attention. You're somebody in the eyes of that wrestling arena at that particular moment in time. And that meant the world to me, regardless of what it meant anything to the people in the crowd, but that meant everything to me. And anybody out there that wants to be a wrestler, Twisted Wrestling Studios, every Sunday at 2, the cook is going to teach you how to do this, that, and the other. Maybe with a headlock takedown. Or what do you call those things? Bottom wrist lock takedown. Steve Kerr used to do that awesome. Nobody does that anymore.
How about fireman's carry?
A fireman carry. I used to do it. I stole it from Brian Blair where you did a hammerlock into a fireman's carry. I stole it from Brian Blair.
Borrowed it.
Paid tribute to it, man.
Paid tribute to it. Yeah.
But I'm one of the only people who did that.
You were a great heel in your time.
I enjoyed being a heel.
So did I.
My wife didn't like it, but that.
When I had the opportunity to work baby or heel, for those of you who don't know, baby is a good guy, heel is a bad guy. I always chose heel because I thought they remembered you better. You could make more of a statement. So the one time that I did get to go up to New York for WWE, WWF, and I actually saw Rusty Brooks up there.
Another one.
You know who else I saw? So this was like an audition. They had an open audition, for lack of a better term. Roger Kirby
I remember him.
was up there auditioning. And I felt so bad for him because nobody knew who he was.
Oh.
And I went up and said hi to him, the Nature Boy. His hair was not blonde anymore.
Right.
It was brown.
He was a good worker, too.
He was a great worker. I felt so bad
I
for him
apologize.
that
He was a great
doing
worker.
that. Yeah. But anyway, so I got paired with the guy that I didn't know, and we were going to go out and do a tag match.
You were complaining because people didn't know Roger, but you didn't know the guy you were... I'm just kidding. He was probably a jobber, folks. I hate that term. Why'd you bring it up, Mike?
Yep. So we were going to go out and do a tag match, and they said, you're going to work heel. Again, I don't remember who the babies we worked with were, but the guy said, I've never worked heel before. What do we do? I said, well, just follow my lead. 10,000 people in the arena. We walked out, and they're playing some kind of music, entrance music, and I pointed up to somebody, and I said, why don't you go home and beat your wife, you drunken bum? People started throwing cans and cigarette butts and newspapers at us, and I turned to them and I said, now we're heels.
Yeah.
And that was all it took.
It didn't take much back in those days.
Didn't take much back in those days to be a heel. But it was funny that he said to me, I don't know how to be a heel. I go, really? You don't know how to be a heel?
Just be a jerk.
Oh, again, we talked about Louis Estella. Great guy, Louis. I booked him for a show, and initially he was going to work baby. And somebody didn't show up, so I needed Louis to work heel because I know he's a great heel.
It's like the man with 1,000 gimmicks.
Yep. So I went to him and I said, Lewis, changing plans. I need you to work heel tonight. Lewis says, oh, my family's here. I already told him I'm going to be the baby. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be that. I said, well, sorry. I'm sorry I wasted your time. Maybe I'll get you on the next show. And I walked over and held the door for him. So he left. I always had a backup.
Wow.
I had somebody else there that could work for me. 5 minutes later, he comes walking back in. He says, I'll do this for you this one time. I said, you'll do it for me every time.
I'm the promoter.
Number one rule, do what the promoter asks you to do. I said, you'll do it for me every time. If I ask you to work heel, you work heel.
People don't realize that if you show up with a good attitude, that goes a long way.
Yeah. So he did. He worked heel for me that night, and it was great. But again, do what the promoter asked you to do. That was, you know who was at that show? Sean Waltman.
Ah, I love Sean Waltman.
Sean Waltman. I didn't know it was Sean at the time. It was some skinny kid with long hair. He was there with some of the other guys, and he asked me if he could do something. I said, yeah, go set up these chairs for me.
Sean used to help out at shows.
Yeah, I gave him $20. I said, go get some Gatorade for me for backstage.
But to capitalize on what you just said, do what the promoter asks. If you're going to be on a show and the promoter says, hey, you're going to be on the show, cut a promo and send it to me. Oh, do this, do that. If you're listening out there and you're going to be on a Twisted Fork, I'm sorry, I did it again, Twisted Fork. We did that one show, right in the nerve. Ooh, right there. The Twisted Wrestling Alliance Studio, January 11th. If you're going to be on a show, they say, do a promo. Do the damn promo.
Takes you 30 seconds.
Not talking to anybody in particular, everybody in general.
Takes you 30 seconds.
Really
Look at the camera and say, hey, Saturday night when I'm here in the Twisted Wrestling Alliance and I'm taking you on, you're going down. Bring your friends, bring your family, because you're going to need somebody to drive you home, my friend. I don't care what happens the rest of the show. I don't care about anybody else. I don't care who else they bring in. It's going to be me and you. Saturday night, Twisted Wrestling Alliance. Bring your family so they can take you home.
See how easy that was?
How hard was
you
that?
Got something written on your hands? No, look at that. Right off the top of his head, folks. Right off the. By the way, Mike, you did a great job. He was our MC at the last show, and you did. I'm not kidding. You did an awesome job.
Cut the promo. If the promoter asked you to cut the promo, cut the promo.
Right, it's
Send
simple.
it in.
And if you don't know how to do it, maybe you weren't trained properly by whoever trained you.
Uh-oh.
How hard is it to do a promo? I mean, geez.
We didn't mention who trained me, did we? Because
it
was the great Malenko.
Oh.
It was a great
You know
Malenko.
what's funny? He mentioned a guy named Ron Hill who went on a radio show with the great Ted Webb, the late great Ted Webb, who was an awesome guy, right? He's on the show with Ted, and he's exposing the business. I think it was Ted's show. I don't know. You can't ask Ted anymore, unfortunately. But Mike Grant showed up and beat his ass live on the radio. Ron Hill, if you're still alive, I wish you were dead.
He's dead.
Oh, well, I wish he was alive so we could kill him again. Cut that part out. Cut that part out. Jordan, get to work. No, but seriously, Mike, it's awesome. You told a lot of great stories. You were in the wrestling business. You had a time of your life, but you had a job besides that, which probably wasn't much fun. But at least you had something to look forward to. But no, I appreciate you being on the show. I don't know if we should end it now, but we probably should.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can sell some books.
MrPresidentBooks.com, Amazon, it's right there. It's a perfect Christmas gift.
Yeah, that's right. Christmas is right around the
corner. Right around the
I
corner.
hate Christmas. I liked it when I was a kid because I got Evel Knievel toys when I was a kid. I had to bring that up, Evel Knievel toys. But no, seriously, Mike, I've known you for a long time. We never were really hung out much. We went to dinner a few times in recent years. Actually, breakfast not long ago, wasn't it?
Breakfast, dinner.
It's hard to remember these things. But I appreciate you coming on the show. Hopefully, if the director would stop writing stuff that we have to read, Southern Posse, that's one I'm glad he wrote down. We're hoping, we're praying. We're not getting on our knees because they're shot. But we're hoping and praying that the Southern Posse, the legendary Southern Posse, Rick Thames and Sonny T are going to be on the show very soon. The Cooker's Corner. They were in part of Suncoast. Boy, the trips that we made to WCW back in the day, some of the things that we did, let's just say, will stay between us before the cameras roll.
All right.
But we had a good time.
Allegedly.
I appreciate you coming on, Mike.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
Tune in next time. I hope they tune in this time and every time after that. The Cooker says out!